Yeah, hello everyone. Um, Welcome and thank you for your interest. As you can imagine, of course, the economics has a lot to say about sustainability, and this means that in the next maybe 45 minutes or so, we can only cover a small part of what this would all be about. And I've chosen to take this inclusive wealth idea as the anchor, and will hopefully shed lights on a couple of aspects on how to measure, how to operationalize inclusive wealth. Yeah, as I've seen, Conrad Ott has been presenting here. The two of us have been collaborating during my time in Kiel for quite a while, and he's also, I should say, quite a good economist, at least when it comes to sustainability. So maybe here and there you have already got some insights into economic theory of sustainability. I would like to start with saying that from an economic point of view, capital is the central notion of sustainability, the central notion, at least, of sustainability economics. And the key thing is that there we distinguish different forms of capital, in particular, of course, natural capital, but then there's also physical capital. There we think of machinery, built infrastructure, and the like, human capital, all the knowledge and skills of humans that is productive, and social capital, all the social relationships, networks, what have you, that are productive. And that when saying that capital is a central notion, we have a very general, a broad definition of capital, namely, capital is any stock that delivers a flow of services. Typically, we think of beneficial services, like when you consider the built infrastructure. The beneficial services is the possibility of or facilitation of transportation, for example. And then the key thing is that here we're speaking of stocks, so these are entities that are permanent over time. So in a sense, these are the entities that connect the now and the future, and this is why it's quite obvious that it's capitals that connect that are central to sustainability. And of course, when we speak of natural capital, then the services we're talking about, typically we speak of ecosystem services, and there you see that this talking of ecosystem services and of natural capital, that is really coming from sustainability economics, and it's central to economic theory of sustainability. And this has been further developed into a theory that is called inclusive wealth, or sometimes equivalently also comprehensive wealth, or genuine wealth. So depending on who has been using these terms, this is slightly different in nuances, but by and large, it's the same. So as you typically, or as you know from everyday economics, wealth is typically taken to be the total value of the assets that one holds oneself. So typically, housing, for example, um, other long-lived items, cars, or the like, and also financial assets. All these together comprise the wealth of an individual, and in a similar fashion, we can speak of the wealth um, of an entire economy, of an entire nation, and there we think of inclusive wealth as the value of all capital assets in that economy. And that is why it is called inclusive, because it is including the value of all capital assets, including produced human and natural capital assets. This notion of inclusive wealth has been developed, among others, by Sir Partha Dasgupta, a Cambridge economist, one of the leading resource economists for many decades now. Another proponent has been Kenneth Arrow, economics Nobel Prize winner, and they together developed this idea that if the inclusive wealth is increasing over time, then this means that human well-being will be increasing over time, and that is their definition of sustainability. That's what they also call like a central theorem of sustainability economics. There you also, I have not seen what Konrad Ott has been presenting. Quite often I have seen him presenting a strong sustainability. So the idea that natural capital assets should not fall below critical levels. And there you see that that the inclusive, or the argument is that the inclusive wealth is not so far from this idea of strong sustainability. And hopefully at the end of this webinar, you see why I think that this is a compromise between very narrow economic thinking and strong sustainability. This idea of inclusive wealth is also central to the so-called Dasgupta Review report on the economics of biodiversity, because biodiversity is one of the key natural capital assets, and because this inclusive wealth is so closely connected to Dasgupta's thinking about sustainability, it also features prominently in the Dasgupta Review report. Now, the idea is that in order to determine inclusive wealth, we somehow need to determine the value of the different forms of capital, especially the value of natural capital. And typically, well, for our normal wealth, right, that comprises mostly produced capitals, we use market prices, so stock market prices, housing market prices to determine wealth in terms of produced capital, and that is usually not possible. So for the market prices here in this diagram from the Dasgupta Review report is shown in light green. That for produced capital that works fairly well, but for natural capital it does not really work because only part of the services provided by natural capital are valued at the market and others are not. But they are part of the true value of natural capital. And this means that one has to determine so-called accounting or shadow prices that would include those parts of the value of natural capital assets that are not valued by the markets. More specifically, when we value the natural capital assets, then the shadow price of a natural capital asset is the present value of all future ecosystem services that would be derived from that natural capital asset. I will come back to this in a minute, but for the time being, I would like to explain how economists try to determine the value of natural capital assets that is not visible on markets. And let's start with an ecosystem service, a typical one, such as air filtration, so the ability of ecosystems to provide clean air. And as you know, we usually do not pay for being able to breathe clean air, so there is no market for this. And instead, one has to determine that value using economic methods. And the reason why the value of ecosystem services or services such as clean air or air filtration is not derived at the market is that there we speak of a common good ecosystem service. Many people at a time have access to a service to a good such as clean air. Now, what is the economic concept of value? The economic concept of value is that the value is derived from the trade-offs that we have. So the idea is that people may be willing to trade off the consumption of produced goods. Think about any consumption good in favor of clean air, if they had to do so. And typically we measure the consumption of produced goods in euro terms, so as the expenditures on all the goods that one is consuming, and then one can have the common good ecosystem service here. And then economists like to depict the willingness of people to trade off the natural goods, such as clean air, for produced goods or expenditures for produced goods in terms of indifference curves. So we tend to think that one can depict lines that show all the combinations of two different goods that an individual would find equally good. And if there's a current situation where this is the amount, the vertical line gives the amount of the common good ecosystem service, and the horizontal line, the current amount of the numerical good consumed, then we can ask the question, what if one increases a little bit the availability of the common good ecosystem service? And then what would be the corresponding quantity of the numerical good that the individual would be willing to give up and end up on the same so-called indifference curve at the same level of well-being. And that gives us the quantity of the numerical good that the individual would be willing to pay in exchange for that increase in the common good ecosystem service. And usually that willingness to pay is what people pay on the market if the ecosystem service was a good that would be for sale on markets. But it is not, and the reason it is not, or one reason it is not, it is a common good. It's accessible for many people at the same time, and for many people for free. And here I've now included a second individual. So in the simplest case, to illustrate the concept, we can assume that there are just two individuals. And one can draw also a diagram with a quantity of numerical good consumed by the second individual and the quantity of the common good ecosystem service consumed by the second individual. And let's assume there's a given total quantity of the produced consumption good available that is given by the distance between the lower horizontal arrow and the upper horizontal arrow. And the point is that this is the produced goods can be consumed only by one individual at a time. We call this their arrival in use. By contrast, the common good ecosystem service can be consumed by both individuals, by many individuals in the same quantity at the same time. That is what is making this a common good ecosystem service. The same clean air is accessible to the same quantity of the clean air is accessible to both individuals at the same time. And changing the quantity of that ecosystem service, increasing it, would increase it for both individuals at a time. And that means we can still depict the quantity that individual one would be willing to give up in a numerical consumption if the common good ecosystem service would be increased. But at the same time, there's a similar corresponding quantity for the second individual, and the total value is the sum of the two. So the key insight, and it's now 70 years old, is that for common good ecosystem services, the value is the sum of the values that this common good ecosystem service has for all the individuals in society. Yeah. So the aggregate economic value, which we also can call the social willingness to pay for common good, is the sum of all individual values. So the sum of all individual willingnesses to pay. And now the question is how to find out this. Let's take this here for the case of clean air. There is a quite large and famous study some 15 years ago that has been done for the United States, where they have been assessing in this way the value of clean air to the United States. So what they did is they considered all ground level emission sources for sulfur dioxide, and studied where the sulfur dioxide from these emissions would go to, and what would be the damage to all the individuals who live in those regions. And summing up all those values, all those damages, would give the total damage. Clean air would be the total benefit, so mitigating these emissions would be the total benefit um, from those different ground level sources. And summing up all these would give the total value of improving air quality across the entire United States. And what the study further did is to distinguish different types of damages, different so-called welfare endpoints. This graph shows this for sulfur dioxide and fine particles in terms of the increased mortality cost. This is valued at the so-called value of a statistical life. If you're interested, we can discuss this later on. Second is morbidity, that is the extra health cost by the two pollutants, cost on agriculture, timber, materials, visibility, recreation, and then there's a sum of all these. And there you see that there are three things outstanding. One is the mortality risk, the increased mortality cost of sulfur dioxide and particulate matter. Second is the health, the morbidity cost, and then there's visibility illustrated here, for example, like sulfur dioxide gives rise to fog, more fog, and then this leads to closures of airports, for example. This is where these costs come from. But the main thing is mortality, and this is a whole lot. Talking about the order overall of 46 billion euros in the United States in 2000 prices. So a large number, which is would be the value of improving air quality, but not included in market and not included in national accounts. So what one can try to do, and that is also one of the economic proposals, of course, to improve sustainability, is to establish markets for ecosystem services or services such as clean air. And in the United States, there has been a market for emission permits for sulfur dioxide for a long time, in a similar fashion as we have the emissions trading system for carbon dioxide in the European Union. The market price here is indicated as the horizontal line. So was one market price in May 2008 for sulfur dioxide emission permits in the United States. And then as the histogram here is the marginal damage. So the total value of improving air quality at the various sites in the United States. And one sees that the market price has been always way below the actual marginal damage. So the market, even this artificial market, the emissions trading system, was far off from valuing the true damage of sulfur dioxide. Let me illustrate this also in this typical economics diagram. So economists like to put the price or the marginal cost, MC, on a vertical axis of a diagram and the quantity. So in this case, the amount of air pollution. Pollution goes from right to left, or abatement, so a reduction of pollution from left to right. Then one has can draw the market value of permits for emitting sulfur dioxide. This would be the market price corresponding to the red line in the previous diagram. This is the total quantity of sulfur dioxide emitted. And then this rectangle, price times quantity, is simply the total market value, as it would be done also in national accounts. And the market value is determined by the point here, the marginal abatement cost, the marginal cost of reducing sulfur dioxide emissions at the given allowed level of pollution, which is this distance between A and B. But as shown in the in the study, in the empirical study, the marginal damage, so the value in terms of improved health and life in the absence of SO2 emissions is given here by this point way above the marginal cost of abating SO2 emissions at this allowed level of pollution. That's this line, and the correct value would be valuing this pollution at the marginal damage, at the aggregate marginal damage of the current level. So that is what is called the gross external damage. And then one could derive the say that the net external damage are the gross external damage net of the market value of permit. And so the idea is that sometimes the market exists, but one should include on top for inclusive wealth accounting also the net external damages, and that should ideally also be included in the national accounts. Now I would like to use a couple of minutes to go the step from the valuation of common good ecosystem services to the valuation of natural capital, such as forest cover. And there the point is that this kind of natural capital assets, and you can think of a forest that would provide both services that are traded on markets, like timber, biomass, and the like, and values that are not traded on markets, such as the possibility to go hiking, have recreational values. Currently, also CO2 sequestration and things like that are not included in or not included in markets. There are no market prices for that. So there are a lot of those values that would have to be derived by extra valuation studies, but there are also some market values. The key difference between the valuation of ecosystem services and of natural capital is that the value of natural capital is the value of the stock, of the standing trees, of the stock of area covered by trees, and not the flow of ecosystem services, so the amount of timber in a given year or the amount of recreational visits in a given year. Because and that's an important number, this value of natural capital, because changing the forest cover would not only change the ecosystem services in 1 year, but also in all future years to come. And that is why the value of the stock of natural capital is the key thing that we're interested in when it comes to the assessment of sustainability, especially using this concept of inclusive wealth. So the value of natural capital is the present value of all future ecosystem services that we could expect from that natural capital. Think of an area of forest. Now there are two things that I would like to discuss. One is that the value of the future ecosystem services will change with their scarcity relative to produced goods. And I will illustrate this in a minute using a diagram like I used before to introduce the economic concept of value. And the second element is that the value of natural capital is the present value of future ecosystem services. That means that one has to somehow convert a value of an ecosystem service that will arise in the future to come into a value today, so into a present value. And the procedure that converts those values in the future into present values is called discounting. And both elements I would like to briefly discuss. One thing is that by and large, we would expect in the future that the produced goods will continue to increase. So at least worldwide, and for a couple of decades, the expert economists expect economic growth. So more goods that are traded on markets will be available in the future. By contrast, natural capital does not increase equally. And for some natural capitals, such as forest cover, the worldwide aggregate is even on the decrease. Although there are some, like this graph here from our World in Data shows, although there are some regions in the world where forest cover is increasing, the majority of the world forest cover is decreasing. Increasing is green and decreasing is red. And I'm sorry, the legend is missing. Okay, it's just illustrating the point. Now the question is, what does it mean if one of the two of the goods, namely the produced goods, here called the numeraire good, is increasing over time, and the other one is decreasing or stagnant? Let's assume it simply remains the same, and that if the first cover remains the same, we can expect the common good ecosystem service to remain the same. But the numeraire good is increasing over time. So if we start in the present here, then if the common good ecosystem service remains the same, then of course that is the economic growth is good, meaning that the individual under consideration finds the new situation better. The so-called indifference curve is above the previous one, and then if you look further into the future, it's even better. The new indifference curve is above the yet previous one. And there you see what happens is that the slope of the indifference curve, and that is approximating for a small increase in the common good ecosystem service, how much of the produced good, numeraire good, an individual would be willing to give up. So what is the willingness to pay? That is increasing over time. So the value that is attached to the common good ecosystem service will increase over time if the ecosystem service remains constant, but the economy in terms of produced good is growing. We should anticipate that the value of ecosystem services will increase in the future. And that depends on the shape of those indifference curves. So that is shown here for the economic standard. We call this Cobb-Douglas preferences. But it could also be that ecosystem service and the produced goods are closer substitutes. So it's easier to shift from natural goods to produced goods. That would be here shown on the right-hand side. And then you see that there's still an increasing in the willingness to pay, but it's not quite as strong. Whereas in the case of complements, so that means that the more one has of produced goods, the more urgently one would like to have an intact nature, then the increase in the slopes here, so in the willingness to pay, would be even higher than in the case of the Cobb-Douglas. And that is important to recognize. Why? Because it's when doing this valuation of ecosystem services, the current practice in national accounts, and also, for example, in Germany, for environmental assessment, environmental impact assessment, the costs that one uses for foregone ecosystem services is simply a fixed number. It should not, if we expect the economy to grow. And then we should expect that this value will grow. And if that value grows, this also increases the present value of a natural capital. So that's the one aspect. And of course, in order to compute the natural capital value, one needs to know both how will produced goods change into the future, and how does the amount of common good ecosystem services change into the future. The other aspect that I would like to briefly discuss is that of discounting. So because we have to anticipate the value of future ecosystem services and then turn into the present values, this way of converting future into present values plays a big role, and this is done by discounting, and the discounting is expressed typically in percent per year. So by how many percent per year does a value that arise in the future, the present value of something that becomes valuable in the future, decrease the further it becomes available in the future. And so you can think of this in a similar fashion as an interest rate. the higher the interest rate, for example, that you would have to pay if you borrow money, the more you would have to pay back in the future for each euro that you're borrowing now. And typical values are shown here, like in the colors: 1.5% per year, 2% per year, or 2.5% per year. And I would say that the natural capital asset that is best studied among economists worldwide is the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Um, and the value, so the shadow price or accounting price for carbon dioxide that is emitted into the atmosphere is called the social cost of carbon. It's computed as the sum of all damages that are due to an extra ton of CO2, and that means all damages around the entire globe and from now into the indefinite future, but the future being discounted, for example, at 1.5% per year, 2 or 2.5% per year. And the estimate of that value is highly uncertain. So although it's called the social cost of carbon, it's actually not a number. We don't know. And despite all this research, there's no certainty about the social cost of carbon, about the correct price. You see here from a recent study by Aufhammer this year, published by Aufhammer this year, that the social cost of carbon ranges anything between 0 and $1,000 per ton of carbon. So this is the probability density, the distribution over various estimates of the social cost of carbon. And the big thing, the point that I'm making, it's twofold. One is the big uncertainty, so we don't know. By and large, although we know that the mean is somewhere around $200 per ton of carbon. The second point is that the distribution depends to a large extent on the discount rate. The larger the discount rate, the lower will be the resulting social cost of carbon, and that is a big effect. So this 1% per year, percentage point per year from 2.5 to 1.5 increases the social cost of carbon by something, the average social cost of carbon, something like a factor of 4. It's a big effect. So with that, I would like to conclude already and give room for discussion. The inclusive wealth concept says that one needs to value all human-made and natural capital asset at their so-called shadow prices or accounting prices. And especially for natural capitals that are beneficial for many people, so that have whose services have characteristics of common good, one has to sum up all individual values for these ecosystem services. The economic value of natural capital is the present value of all future ecosystem services so derived, and this depends on the future relative scarcity of ecosystem services. So we expect that value to increase into the future if there is economic growth in terms of produced goods. It also depends on the expectation about future ecosystem management, so especially about the amount of ecosystem services that will be available in the future. How the management translates into the amount of ecosystem services that will become available in the future. And the key point, of course, is that inclusive wealth accounting comes at considerable uncertainty. So uncertainty with respect to projecting the future supply of natural capital and ecosystem services. What will be the future economic conditions is also, of course, uncertain. And agreeing on which welfare function to use is uncertain, especially with respect to the discounting, so how we trade off future benefits to present cost or benefits. Okay, with that, I would like to conclude and